Right, this tissue type is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, and well, I might ask you to identify any of these little dark bars, intercalated discs. The heart pumps blood into the arteries closest to the heart. These are this is an elastic artery. It's the vessel wall. And you might be asked to identify the tunics. Tunica intima. From here to here is tunica media. This is tunica adventitia. You need to know the tissue types. For the elastic arteries, if I point to any black fibers and say identify the black fibers, they're elastic fibers. The pinkish fibers are smooth muscle cells. The content of the tunica adventitia are largely collagen fibers. If we take a closer look up at tunica adventitia, I might point to small blood vessels. Those are called the vasovasorum. So I'm going way back, but this was all taught, ground covered. So elastic artery, tunica adventitia, vasovasorum. What are the black fibers again? Elastic. Let's look at this slide here. The smaller blood vessels here, this is a muscular artery. That's a large vein, muscular artery. And you can see all three tunics on both vessels. If we take a close-up look, again, muscular artery. Tunica intima, tunica media, tunica adventitia. Okay? Notice how you have this black squiggly line, which symbolize, well, it doesn't symbolize, it is the internal elastic lamina. Notice how you have smooth muscle and the blackish fibers. There's less content of it, but that would be the elastic fibers of the tunica media, but it's mostly muscle. That's why this is a muscular artery. And this is, you have collagen fibers and elastic fibers in the tunica adventitia as well. Now this one here is a large vein. We can see the tunica intima right there with some elastic tissue in there. There's the tunica media. And from here to here is what? What tunic? Adventitia. I think it's easy to see. Okay, I think the tunics are easy questions. If you can just make out the layers, just remember TI, TM, TA. This is also a muscular artery. I see a lot of elastic tissue here in the TI. There's the TM. There's the TA. This is a muscular artery. Here's an arterial. How many layers? 2. A TI, TM, no TA. Tunica intima, tunica media. This happens to be an arteriole from the spleen. This is white pulp. I see 3 layers. A TI, a TM, a TA. Now, another clue is, look how wide this thing is. I see a lot of blackly stained blood vessels, blackly stained red blood cells in this one blood vessel there. But compare that to the diameter of this blood vessel. That's my capillary. Okay. That's a good example of a capillary. It barely accommodates the width of just one red blood cell, so we'll go with capillary for that. And so the definition is, how many layers? 1. And what's the layer if I had to identify it? TI. Tunica intima. Let's move on. There's a venule. The best example of where I know a venule exists is the central venule of a liver. Okay, so go call that a venule. I haven't taught liver yet, but that's a venule. Here, closer up, that's a venule. venule, a small vein. Now we get into the blood. I have 2 arrows here. What does this point to? Fragments, platelets. That's a beautiful monocyte, kidney-shaped view. These are all eosinophils. Okay, here's a better one. I like this one for eosinophil. It's a little blurry, but you can make out the red granules in the bilobe nuke. Eosinophil. These 2 are the same, neutrophils. But what if I pointed to that little fragment? Platelet, and any of these, red blood cell. Okay. That's a possibility. And, well, this condition, iron deficient anemia, I see a bunch of platelets. The decreased crit, the cells are kind of clumping together. There's a microcyte, the more translucent red blood cell. Microcyte. This is a sickle cell anemia. I just look for the little puckered red blood cells. That tells me it's the sickle cell. For the iron deficient, I look for the microcytes. Okay, not the puckered cells. So that, again, iron deficient anemia, sickle cell anemia. Okay, back to identifying cells. Lymphocyte, nice large lymphocyte. I see the red granules again. I see the bilobe nature. Eosinophil. All right, so that's kind of the blood cells I wanted you to identify to kind of like bring it up to speed with the respiratory things. I did cover the tracheal wall, adventitia. You remember what the gap from here to here is? Submucosa. And this is mucosa. Okay. Now the details, I got to go to higher mag. I may have you identify this tissue. It's a ciliated, pseudostratified, columnar epithelial tissue with goblet cells. There's a lot of them there. Some there. They're all along here. What do we call this? The basement membrane? Lamina propria. We also see the submucosa. We see nicely arranged seromucous glands or just mucus glands. Some kind of mucus, some kind of gland. I'll put that in there as a choice. I usually want you to identify those as well. This is a nice picture showing you the hyaline cartilage of the tracheal ring. What's the adventitial layer, but it's hyaline cartilage. That's the tissue type. If we go from trachea to bronchial lung tissue, that's a nice picture of bronchiole right there. And do you see how it branches out into two, what would you call them? Alveolar duct, the hallway. Alveolar duct, alveolar duct. I think that's a good alveolar sac. And then, what do you call the individual dead end spaces? The alveoli or alveolus, if you will. There's a bronchiole. But that's a blood vessel because I see the smooth muscle and I see the red blood cells inside there. I won't have you identify that though. I kind of stick more to, once again, bronchiole, alveolar duct, alveolar sac, alveolus. I usually stick to that for the normal lung tissue. Here's a closer up picture. The cuboidal epithelium with sparse cilia. I may have you identify that as a tissue type for the bronchiole. We did go over that in lecture. Okay. More long. If I put the pointer inside there, what's the structure? Look for the cuboidal there. Bronchiole. Alveolus. This is a big alveolar sac here. There's a nice alveolar sac with the dead ends being the alveolar spaces or alveolus. Okay. This is normal lung. What is this? Emphysema lung, low mag, and a higher mag. We have fewer, larger alveolar spaces. This is definitely diseased lung. Once again, that's a lower mag of emphysema lung. That's a higher mag of emphysema lung. I think if you know that, you should do well on the quiz. Stop the slide.